Goldsmith I'm letting some people in, so here we go. So Goldsmith marries a Rachel Dockery and then a Louisa Jane Dockery. And then he marries a Kitty Francis. And Kitty Francis has a child by the name of Goldsmith Walker. Love that name. Love that name. And that's your parental grandfather. And he is listed as a farmer also. And then Daisy is his wife. And here they come with Goldsmith Walker II. So we're going to maybe ask you a couple of things about that name in a little while. But welcome so much, sir. We are thrilled that you said yes to coming on and doing this presentation. We all love honey. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, sir, and let you just tell all the nice things about your factory and store.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be with you guys, and thank you, Janice Sue, for inviting me, and to the group for welcoming me. Yeah, I have a lot in common with you guys who celebrate your farm heritage. I'll just touch on that briefly. Janice Sue, noted that so much of my family is farmers way back to the Carolinas and all across the South, really. Interestingly, my grandfather, who started in beekeeping, didn't follow in farming, although everybody had a vegetable garden and everybody did some what we might consider now farming, but he was a full-time butcher and grocer. He and his brother owned a grocery store in the 1920s. Actually, they owned 2 or 3 in some little communities in the county just east of us here in Milam County, Texas. And in 29, they had to close the grocery store, not because of the event that we all know happened in the fall of 29, the great market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression, but because in Milam County, it didn't rain all summer, and his customers who had been writing a bill for their groceries for almost a year, one by one came in the fall and said, "Mr. Walker, we're not going to be able to pay our bill this fall. We didn't make a crop." And so he was essentially broke, although he had $500 left when he closed out the store from turning back in the groceries to the grocery distributor, what was not perishable, and made a living for about 6 months just butchering calves and selling the meat out of the back of his Model A pickup in the Brazos Valley near Bryan College Station, where Texas A&M is. And in the spring of 1930, took the money he had out of the beekeeping business, out of the grocery business, salvaged, and bought bees. And so we've been in beekeeping ever since. So it was actually a butcher and a grocer that got us into full-time farming for the last 90 some odd years. We say that we only got into beekeeping because we couldn't make it in any other profession. That's our family heritage. Well, so I would love to just give you a quick overview of the business. And really there's 2 main sweeps or 2 main periods of our business. That's the first 70 years when my grandfather and my dad were in a really beekeeping intensive type business where all of the income was directly related to the beehive. And I know that's the way we all think of beekeeping is the beekeeper keeps the bees and makes the honey. And of course, we know that beekeepers lease out their hives to farmers that grow crops that need pollination services. The big one in the United States is almonds out in California. But you all know of local crops in your area that need pollination services. Everything in the cucurbit family, that would be the cucumbers and the squashes and the watermelons, and all of those must have adequate pollination service provided. There's not nearly enough wild bees in an area to cover a commercially grown crop of any of the cucurbits. So they all hire beekeepers to come in and place bees. So we did a lot of that. We pollinated cucumbers for Heinz Pickle Company on the high plains of Texas back in the 60s and 70s. And we've shipped bees to almonds in California for 20 years. We've done a lot of watermelons in Texas, all over the state. We've done vegetable seed crops, something people don't think about. You can grow onions from seed or from sets, but you can't produce onion seed without honeybees. And the same goes for alfalfa. You don't need a honeybee to grow an alfalfa plant and cut the hay and have an alfalfa crop, but you can't grow alfalfa seed without honeybees on the alfalfa. So we've done alfalfa seed pollination, and on it goes. So this was our business for 70 years, producing honey, pollination for service, fee for service for pollination services. And we also did several other things to sell queen bees and package bees and nuclei or new hives to start for people getting started in business. Some of you may know about package bees. It's 2 or 3 pounds of bees in a screened box with a queen in there that someone can ship across the country, even ship by postal service, and receive it and put it into their own box and start their own hive. So we were doing all those hive-centric things. And then in the 90s, we had a couple of parasites came in from Asia, 2 different mites. And with those mites, some new viruses. And so we saw the challenges coming down the road. About the time my wife and I bought the business from my parents, that would have been 1994. And we made a couple of good honey crops, but we saw the mites coming, and my wife very wisely said, I just wonder if maybe we shouldn't be thinking about broadening our scope of what we do with this beehive and the beehive products. And thankfully, I had a wise partner in business, and we began to move in that direction. In about 2000, we began what I would call that second era or second broad movement of our company history, from hive-centric to some vertical integration. And we began bottling all of our honey. We were fortunate enough to have good grocery accounts to be able to establish around 2000, the early 2000s. And by 2005, we were producing more, we were bottling more honey than we could produce, and began buying honey from other beekeepers in Texas and eventually around the country, and now even some imported honey from Mexico and different places, as our customers have different requirements. And about that time, we began to open a retail store and grow a retail business. And then in 2011, we decided, since we were doing everything with our honey, making creamed honey, making peanut butter and honey, we decided we would make wine with our honey. So we opened a meadery in 2011. Janice has seen our products. Any of you that have been in our store here in Rogers have seen our mead, our honey wine, and also some grape wines. We have a small vineyard there associated with our new retail store. And then we just continued to grow that retail presence, and then even began to hold farmers markets there on site. We have twice a year festivals that are now attended by over 3,000 individuals, one on Memorial Day and one the second Saturday in October. And they are big blowout events where people who have local farms and grow vegetables, or have chickens and meat products, pork and beef products, can bring their items in and set up a booth and have a big day of selling their products to the community. And many times they get customers. We introduce these vendors to our 3,000 customers, and then they can create a customer list off of our 2 festivals and then service these people direct from the farm. So we've helped several local farmers find outlets. We are a CSA pickup point for one of these people, that local vegetable grower. And once a month, he brings by the prepared vegetable boxes, and the people come in and pick up the boxes at our place. And so we just love doing that kind of direct to consumer sales. And then a few years ago, we began to have people request to tour our facility. So we started doing what we call bee to bottle tours, and we show people how we harvest honey and extract it, and then how we bottle it and the different products we make out of it. And we give them a tour of the winery. And so in about an hour, they've had the factory tour and feel like they know their farmer. They know their honey source a little better. Janice Sue, have you had an opportunity to join one of the bee to bottle tours?
No, we have not, but we will the next time we come in.
We do them every first Saturday of the month. We do that, and usually have anywhere from 50 to 100 people tour the farm once a month. I'll give you a quick story on that. Our store manager, Alyssa, that you may have met, Janice Sue.
Yes.
She's moved over to the central office now, but she would be the one that you would have recognized there on Saturday when you've come in for BYOB many times. She said about 3 years ago, people are asking about bee to bottle tours. And I said, well, we could do a tour some Saturday if people want to come, and I'll show them around. And she said, well, what would we charge for that? And I said, oh, people are not going to pay to see a honey farm. They're not going to pay for that. She said, well, let's just charge $5 so that there's revenue, and you may not always be the one doing the tours. And if one of our employees is doing the tours, we need to, compensate the company for the time. And so I said, okay, but very few people are going to pay $5 to tour this place. And I said, after 2 or 3 months, there won't be anybody left that's interested in coming by. Well, that was 4 years ago, I guess, and we're still doing 50 or 100 people every first Saturday of the month. So that tells me that while you and I are proud of our farms and our farming heritage, people who live in cities are anxious to contact and be in contact with and have an experience on the farm. And so that's been a real revelation to me, and that's borne out by the attendance at our twice annual festivals, that people really are looking to get out there on the farm and connect the dots between the food they put in their mouth and the source of that food. And that means a lot to them to have that experience. Well, Janice, let me stop there and let you guys kind of direct what you'd like to hear. I'd be glad to share any aspect of the business, from the beekeeping to the honey bottling to the winemaking, or any business aspect of it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We have always been impressed with your facility and your employees and everyone. I know we have a lot of people who said they were going to have questions. Yes, Stanzi, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Madam President General. Mr. Walker, I have a question. I've also had a talk with Bee America. They're out of Bethesda, and what they've been trying to do is to replicate honeys from the Revolutionary War period by making sure that the honeybees go to specific vegetation to get their pollen. And I'm just curious, with your pollination services, how do you keep a consistency in the honey that you provide?
Great question, Stanzi, and a question that a lot of people ask. It is the job of a beekeeper, or the profession of a beekeeper, to know what is in bloom at what time in what locale. And so we do a lot of on the ground research of moving bees different places and trying different things. I'll give you a couple of examples of where we are able to know that we have a high degree of certitude about the type of honey that we're producing in a location, and an example of when we know we don't. So I'm sounding a little like Donald Rumsfeld, the known knowns and the unknown unknowns, but I'll tell you what I know. So for example, here in the Post Oak Savannah area of Texas, it's a sandy land belt east of I-35 between, let's say between Austin and Houston, or between Dallas and Houston. And it runs north and south through the state. And it's characterized by post oak woods and an understory of a Yaupon holly. And this Yaupon is a very good honey. It's light and has a great flavor to it. And the locals here really love it. We can move our bees to that post oak savanna in March, which we do. And the bloom starts late March and goes till about April 15th or 20th. And there's very little else blooming in the woods at that time, and nothing that the bees prefer as much as they prefer the Yaupon. And so on a given year, when it's sunny during the first 2 weeks of April, and we're out working the bees and we can see them on the blooms and we can taste the honey, and it's got a very distinctive flavor, and we know that's good Yaupon honey, then we can harvest it quickly before the next group of plants start blooming in late April and early May. And if we do that, then we can represent to the customer that comes in the store, this is nearly pure Yaupon honey, or it's 90%. But on the years when it rains during the Yaupon bloom, and we've had this happen, and other things are blooming and the Yaupon doesn't produce well, we maybe get 50% of that harvest will be pure Yaupon, and we can taste that it's not pure Yaupon. We can taste the other things in it. And at that time, we tell the people, well, this is honey from East Milam County. Actually, one year recently, we called it 6 Mile Creek honey, because that was the very specific locale where we had the bees, but it wasn't good enough or pure enough Yaupon to say to the customer, this is Yaupon holly. We have a South Texas plant. It's a brush plant. It's in the acacia family. It's called Guajillo, and it blooms the 1st of April, and nothing else is blooming when the Guajillo is. And if we have a good year, then we know we've got Guajillo honey. And so we try to tell, oh, that's my dogs. Shelby, Emma, lay down, lay down, show your place. My apologies.
Oh, no, that's fine. We love animals.
I'm home alone. My wife is in.
You almost treat it like wine, where you have an appellation.
Yes, ma'am. Very good analogy. And that's one of the reasons, Stanzi, that we got into, that we see as our main job in retail, is to educate the public about honey, like the wine industry has traditionally, like the cheese people do. You don't go to the store to buy cheese. You go to the store, you know what cheese you want for what item you're cooking. So we all have, I have 3 or 4 different cheeses in the refrigerator right now. How many people in America have 3 or 4 different honeys in their cabinet? And so there you go, there's one. And that's our job, is to educate. So it's a great point. And that's one reason why we do what we call varietal honeys. And when people come in, you get to come into our store and taste honeys at no cost. Just walk up to the bar and say, and we used to let you do it on your own. And of course, post-COVID, that's, by the by, we can't leave spoons out. So, but walk up to the bar and say, I'd like to taste your orange blossom honey, or your Guajillo honey, or your Yaupon holly. And we have a dozen or 15 different honey varietals in the store at all times. And that for us is a lot of fun, because then people are not thinking, well, do I want honey or not, but in my tea, but which honey do I want in my hot tea, and which honey do I want on my oatmeal, and which honey do I prefer on my waffles or pancakes?
Stancy, you're welcome. What is the most popular of your honeys, Clint?
Well, I think anywhere in the country, the answer is going to be the honey that is locally produced, because so many people are taking that for health reasons, for allergies, for just general health. Now, when you get outside of the local honeys, and I have local honey in my cabinet from the Carolinas, from the Dakotas, from Montana, from Arizona, from Colorado. So when I travel, I buy the local honeys, but because I'm interested in what other beekeepers are producing. But I think clover honey would certainly be the most sold honey, the most bought and sold honey in the United States. It's smooth and buttery. And if you get good quality Midwestern clover from, say, the Dakotas or Nebraska or Western Minnesota, Montana, that's really hard to beat. I've got some clover honey in my cabinet right now from the San Luis Valley of Colorado. Now, if you're from there, or if you know that valley, it's the San Luis Valley if you live there. But the Spanish, I'm trying to be Spanish correct, San Luis, but nobody there calls it that. It's the San Luis Valley. Just the most marvelous white, buttery, smooth honey in the world. So we buy and sell a lot of honeys from around the world, but our South Texas Guajillo honey is probably the best honey made in Texas. It is just a wonderful, light, almost smoky, light grilled taste to it. It's a joy to put in your mouth or put on some pecans and eat. So
we'll have to try that. I have some questions from the attendees. How long can you keep honey after you open it?
Well, the answer to that, I'll give you a story to answer that question that'll probably surprise you. When they have excavated the tombs of the Egyptian pharaohs, 3,000-year-old tombs, the honey in the clay pots is still perfectly unspoiled and completely edible. And I would certainly love to taste some 3,000-year-old honey. The answer is that if you keep honey, and this is really the guideline, if I opened a jar of honey and put it on my back porch, it would gather moisture from the air, and a wild yeast would fly by and land in it, and it would begin to ferment, and it would make some probably poor quality fermented product. That's about the only thing bad that can happen to honey. If you open a jar of honey and put the lid back on it when you get out, get the honey out and put the lid back on it, put it back in your cabinet, not in your refrigerator, then that honey's going to be fresh and good long after you're gone. Hopefully you eat your honey faster than that. Or like Janice Suit, you fill 48 jars, right? Or 24 jars. I forget what you said it was. Was it 48?
48.
And you know, and it'll crystallize, but then when you get ready to use it, if you want it liquid, just warm it in a water bath, or if you put it in your coffee, put it in your coffee crystallized, and it'll liquefy right there in your coffee. So it just really never spoils. It does crystallize, but will not spoil.
Another question, a statement, smoot honey right up the road from Lee in Montana. Do you know it?
Yeah. Good. Oh, good. They were good friends of ours. My dad and mom and the Smoots were friends back to the 50s. Great beekeeping family, the Smoots, and they talk about producing some wonderful clover honeys. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Great people. We've been very active in national politics, just like you guys, national beekeeping associations, just like you guys are a part of the Farm Heritage Group that you're in. We've been members of the American Beekeeping Federation since 1955. My dad was serving on the board in the 50s and was president in the 80s, and I was president in the in 99, 2000. So we've actively served our industry in Texas, in our state association, and nationally, and that's how we've come across some great people like the Smoots.
Neat.
Nice. Stan, you have your hand up again, ma'am.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry to hog this, but Mr. Clint, do you co-pack the San Luis honey?
We don't. We have in the past bought honey from beekeepers there in the San Luis Valley, and then bottled it under our brand. But we're not doing any of that right now. We'd love to. We'd love to. Again, it's premium quality honey.
Do you know of anybody who does co-pack in Colorado?
Yes, there is.
Why don't we talk offline? Maybe Jan can.
That'd be great. And if you guys don't have my contact information, the best way to reach me is email. That's just Clint, C-L-I-N-T, at walkerhoneyfarm.com. Clint at walkerhoneyfarm, just one farm.com. Be glad to visit with any of you. Someone else had a hand up there, I think I saw.
Davina.
I did. How many bees are in a hive, more or less?
Oh, great question, Davina. Before mites, hives would routinely have 40 or 50,000 worker bees per colony. And our big hives that produce the big crops would routinely get to a size over 50,000 worker bees. So that's one queen and a few hundred drones, and the rest are all the workers, which are the infertile females that do all the foraging. Nowadays, I would say in the United States, the average production strength colony would be somewhere in the 30 to 35,000 worker bee range. At that level, we feel like we can make a good honey crop, and because it takes 15,000 bees to do the work that has to be done inside the hive. And so if you have 30,000 bees, then you have 15,000 foragers on any given day and 15,000 bees doing inside the hive work, feeding the young, taking care of the queen, cleaning, ripening honey, storing pollen, all the house duties, which is the young bees. And then as they get older, they do the outside foraging. So you can see that if I have a 30,000 worker population hive, I have 15,000 foragers. But if I could have a 45,000 forager population, I've doubled my foraging. I've only added 50% more bees to the colony, but I've added 100% more foraging capacity. So my honey crop will be twice as large. So just a little hive economics for you.
Interesting. And then how long does the queen bee live?
Well, a queen bee is the longest lived of all the bees in the colony. They have been recorded to live over 7 years.
Oh.
Their productive life, however, used to be 2 to 3 years. I'm thinking 30 years ago before the mites. And now with mites, we replace every queen every year at a minimum because of the loss in fertility. And so we are replacing queens a lot more often. Worker bees, on the other hand, at best have a 6 to 7 week lifespan. And so it's a constant turnover in the hive, one queen providing the same pheromone, organizing the hive, leading the hive, but her daughter population is constantly revolving.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Fascinating. Any other questions?
Okay.
Mr. Richards.
Yes. Leslie has managed to get me a mic, so I'll make a few words. Mr. Walker, this is a wonderful discussion. I am 86 years old, and when I was in junior high in the early 1950s, there was a state of Iowa bee inspector who was also a rural mail carrier, and he taught me what little I know about beekeeping. And he set me up in wooden hives, and I worked on a merit badge in Boy Scouting having to do with beekeeping, and I very much enjoyed that whole process. I haven't kept stands of bees for years now, but can you comment on the foul brood disease that we experienced in the 50s? Is that still prevalent?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Richards, and thank you for sharing your story in beekeeping. And you know, just a quick comment before I answer your American foul brood question. From the 1900s, certainly by the 1920s and up through the 50s and into the 60s even, so many farms had bees on the farm, just like people have chickens now. I know there's a resurgence in people who are keeping a few chickens, not commercial, you know, poultry or egg production, but just have a few chickens. And that's the way bees used to be. Just almost everybody had a few hives of bees behind the barn, you know, and that was honey production for the family. That was the main sweet that was consumed, the main sugar that was consumed by the family in a lot of places. I know some of you that live in maple country would dispute that and say, well, around here it was maple, not honey. And some of you folks in, you know, in Tennessee and the Central South might say it was sorghum cane and, you know, grinding and milling your own sorghum cane. But certainly in Texas, it was bees and honey. And so a lot of people have that experience that you had, Mr. Richards. American foul brood is really 100% controllable now. We have antibiotics that we really don't even need to use on an ongoing basis. But when we have a colony that we can diagnose American foul brood in, we can give it a couple of treatments over a 2-week period of a kind of a general purpose antibiotic and clear up the disease. And so we've managed to come out on top of what was, as you noted, in the 50s and 60s, a real scourge on beekeeping. But we've got tools now to deal with that.
Well, thank you for the answer to that. Might I ask a few other questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you produce honey in the pound of boxes that we used to make rather than the sections for brood chamber? Do you produce honey in the wooden boxes? I used to sell those for $5 a piece when I was raising bees, walking around the neighborhood in the little Iowa town of 5,000.
Oh, that's great. I love to hear that story. Yes. So you were selling the honey. Let me understand what you're saying. You were selling the honey in the comb, correctly?
Yes, and it was enclosed within a box, a section box that we put into the hive body.
Yes, that section box was about, let's say, 5 inches by 5 inches, something like that. Yes, sir. Yes, I did some of that with my dad in the 60s when I was a kid. You've got me by a couple of years, but I do remember that. In fact, I think I've still got one of those section boxes in my warehouse. I think I know where it is. We do produce some comb honey. Our business has gotten so large with comb honey that we have had to reach out to other comb honey producers in the US and Canada and now even Hungary. I just checked our number. Last year, we sold 35,000 of those units of comb honey that you're describing.
Yes.
So we can't produce that much on our 1,200 hives of bees. So we have to buy comb honey and ship it in from around the country and around the world.
Well, it's an amazing business. There's another aspect of that comb honey. We used to cut with a hot knife. We'd cut sections of honey out and put them in a package rather than having the wooden box around it.
Yes, sir. And that's mostly how it's done these days. And we still do that. We still just take a knife and cut it out of the frame and slip a chunk of it in a jar and then fill some honey around it and sell it that way.
Does the name AI Root ring a bell?
Oh, yes, sir. They're the oldest, yes, they're still in operation, the Root Company. They're the oldest bee supply company in the United States. They do a lot of candles. Before the Catholic Church allowed churches to burn non-beeswax candles, paraffin candles, when they required all the churches to burn beeswax candles, the AI Root Company was the #1 candle maker in the world.
Medina, Ohio?
Yes, sir.
My memory's good.
Very good. Very good.
Your memory is excellent, Mr. Richards.
Well, thank you for letting me blab on.
Great to hear your questions. Very informed questions.
You come back on anytime, Mr. Richards. We welcome you. I have some questions on the chat. How large are hives that hold 20,000 to 30,000? The next one is, how can you tell which bee is the queen bee?
Our hive configuration, there's a standard for hive construction that, quite amazingly, you'll appreciate this, Mr. Richards, way predates you and I. 1860s was when a gentleman created the Langstroth hive that we call it. That was his name, Langstroth. And the dimensions really haven't changed much in the last 160 years. So it's rather amazing. It's a factor of, so the box size, the height, the width, and the length of the box are the same. And we just continue to stack more empty boxes on top of the hive as the hive needs space to grow and to put more honey in. And then we'll take those boxes off and into our extracting facility to take the honey out of them, but we'll always leave more empties back on the hive. And so sometimes a hive will be taller than my head, but on average, a hive that's got a full crop of honey on it will be about chest high to an average height person. Okay, the queen bee, how do you recognize a queen bee? She is longer and she's got a larger abdomen, and she is always on the brood comb. You always know where to find her because she's where the young are being reared, because all she does all day long is lay eggs. A queen bee can lay 1,500 eggs in a day. I'm gonna let that soak in there. 1,500 eggs a day. So she's walking from cell to cell, looking in the cell and seeing if there's an egg. And if there's not, she lays an egg in it. And so this is called the brood nest, where they rear all the brood, they feed the larvae, and the larvae then pupates and hatches into young workers. And when that worker hatches, the queen goes right back across that cell, lays another egg in it, and 3 weeks later, that egg is a worker emerging and beginning to do hive duties. So the queen is physically just much larger. Now, she's not as fat. Her abdomen is not as large as a drone, but she's longer and sleeker than a drone and than a worker bee, and easily recognizable by the beekeeper.
Good.
Could I interject another question?
Of course.
In terms of construction, Mr. Walker, the hives that I assembled were wood, and they were beautiful. And we used cypress bottom boards. And are they now made of plastics and other materials, or is wood still prevalent?
Wood is still the predominant material for building beehives. I will say the frames that go in the boxes. Now, a lot of the frame components are plastic, either the foundation that used to be beeswax when you were doing it. Now we have plastic foundation that we actually prefer. Interestingly, we still like a wooden frame with a plastic foundation insert as opposed to a full plastic frame. We've used a lot of the full plastic frames. The wood actually performs better in our uncapping machines and in our extracting machines. So because it is softer than plastic and it is more durable, it can take the abuse better than plastic, the abuse of handling. So we still have wooden boxes, wooden frames, and a plastic sheet insert of a foundation that has the shape of the cell pressed into it, just like your beeswax foundation did when you were beekeeping in the 50s.
Yes. Well, that's wonderful. Superseding of queens, I noticed that you said you replace your bees every season, and that's amazing because we didn't engage in that back in the 50s, but we did occasionally have a superseding of a queen, and we would have a swarm go out of a hive. Of course, this has not changed over time, I'm sure.
That's correct, but it's part of the good husbandry of the beekeeper to try not to allow the hive to swarm. So when we see a hive getting into swarming mode, then we do we have several manipulation techniques that we can use to stop the swarming urge, we call it. And one of the things that we do, for example, if I have a hive with 2 boxes and they're full of bees, and we open it up and we can say, well, they're just packed full of bees, and we'll take an empty box and put between the 2 boxes, give the queen some open space to lay eggs in. We might even put an empty underneath that brood box to stop the swarming urge. And so our goal is to try to get the population as large as we can get it before the honey crop starts, before we call it a honey flow, before the plants start blooming, the target plants. And the larger the population we get, then the more honey that hive can make.
In Iowa back in the 50s, we had to attempt to winter over our bees. Now, you in Texas have a more mild climate, so you don't have that problem, but we used to have to put tar paper, etc., around the hive in the winter, and then in the spring, we would feed sugar water at the entrance to the hive.
Yes, sir. We still do some supplemental feeding in the off season when the bees don't have any nectar to forage. We'll even do a protein supplement inside the hive when they don't have good pollen to forage. But yes, right now, our bees are full of fresh pollen. The water elm blooms here in the middle of January, while you northern people are still stuck in winter. We can have a winter storm, as you know. You listen to the news, sure. And you know we have our winter storms, but they're short-lived. Yeah. And today we're in we'll be about 60 degrees here, and next Monday it'll be 85 degrees. Wow. And our beekeepers were working bees the early part of this week when the temperatures were in the 70s, and we have lots of fresh pollen coming in, and our first nectar will start here in about 30 days, and we'll start making our honey crops.
Fascinating. Thank you for the answers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Clint, we have some other questions. How many hives do you have? And that's from Nancy. And then Debbie said, how often does a beekeeper get stung?
Nancy, we have 1,200 hives. It varies throughout the year. At the peak next spring, we'll be managing about 1,200 or 1,300, sometimes 1,400 hives. And we build up our number in the spring, and then we lose hives throughout the year. And then over the winter, before mites, we used to lose 5 or 10% of our colonies, and now we lose 50%, 40 to 50%, and have to rebuild every spring. So at the low point, then some years we get down to 400 or 500 colonies, and in the spring we build back up and come out of the spring at about 1,200. And the second question from Debbie was, remind me, Janice Sue?
How often does a beekeeper get stung?
Oh, yes. Well, let's see. The real easy answer is almost every day that we go out to work bees, if we would get stung. If we were careful and really worried about getting stung, we could probably get stung a handful of times a week at a minimum. But a lot of the times we just don't want to put our bee gloves on, and we just, you know, it's a nice spring day, and we even sometimes open a hive without a bee veil on in certain circumstances. So, you know, it's a trade-off for us. I will say this: people say, "Well, how do you stand to get stung by bees all the time?" And it's a carpenter asking me that question. And I said, I would much rather get stung by bees. I look down at their thumb and they've got a blood blister under their thumb where they hit their hammer on their thumb, or, you know, or you know, there's occupational hazards
Yes.
in any occupation. And so it's just it's a matter of tolerance, and we get used to it, and we probably take about as many stings as we're willing to tolerate.
Well,
I've been in situations where I was stung way more than I wanted to be stung, but I'll save those stories for when we sit down over a glass of mead.
Sounds good.
Well, this is Mr. Richards interrupting again. From my perspective of years ago, being stung was not a problem if you treat the bees gently. And this is and there are personalities among the bees. The Italian strain is wonderful, but there were some other strains that weren't so nice, that were more aggressive.
Everything Mr. Richards just said is true.
Well, I know we're into your time frame. Stanzi, yes, one last question.
Well, the concern has always been, if the honeybees go away, we will all perish. I just wondered if you could equate the situation in the United States with that in the world.
Well, it's here's what would happen if we lost our honeybees. We would lose a third of the food that we eat. So imagine going into the grocery store and every third aisle of groceries is completely empty. But actually, it's a little worse than that, because the stuff that we really like to eat is dependent on honeybees. So what we would have left if we didn't have honeybees, the things that you can grow without a honeybee ever being involved, is the grains, the cereal grains. So we can still have oats and wheat and barley and things like that. But so many of your fruits and vegetables are dependent now upon honeybees, and a lot of the nuts too.
Right. But my question is, how do we as the United States stand as far as the rest of the world? In regards to the honeybees? Well, like, are we in good shape, or are the more pollutant countries like India or China, are they, you know, I mean, how are we? Yeah, I would say that bees are imperiled across the globe. That's really one universal thing that we know, is that there's not many places on the globe where bees are having a good time of it. In a global economy world, every good thing can be shared, but every bad thing will be shared. And that's where our mites came in from Asia, and we've got viruses here from the Middle East and Asia and South America, things that our bees were never challenged with. But that's the case across the world. Global trade
spreads all the good things and all the bad things. And we certainly are struggling with the bad things that we've accrued to us through global trading, through the modern economy.
Thank you. Thank you. We customarily have a toast from our Toastmaster. So before we end, I've got a couple of things to do. And Clint, please stay on. I've got thanks to give you. We have a certificate that we're going to, not this one, but we have a certificate that we're going to mail you. And then I'll get with you and maybe I will finish your research if it's not already done. And I will give that to you as a gift from farmers. Customarily, we have a toast at the end of each one of our Zooms. So while I'm setting up that toast, because our Toastmaster isn't here today, but he's recorded it for you. So Davina, would you please share our magnificent numbers?
Happily. 1,373 members, 1,373 members across the nation. And we have honored 1,485 extra farmers, ancestor farmers, our supplementals. So we are really reaching the limits now on, the sky's the limit. It's forever. Farmers, wonderful.
And we have just donated the $74,000 in 3 years to our scholarship winners. So you members, you really make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Each of you. Thank you.
74,000. So let's see if this works. I bet it does. So this is our Toastmaster. Can everybody see him?
Yes.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I couldn't join you in person today, but as many of you who belong to several societies probably know, occasionally there are conflicts in your schedule that are just unavoidable. So I wanted to pre-record this. Because it's pre-recorded, I apologize for it being possibly a bit generic or not being particularly applicable to the subject, but I did the best I could with what I could find. So, on behalf of the officers and members of the National Society Descendants of American Farmers, I want to thank Walker Honey Farms for providing us with another fun and educational presentation today. Beekeeping and honey collecting are some of the oldest known agricultural professions, with bees being kept at temples in Egypt and Mesopotamia to produce honey for temple offerings and mummification. The myriad uses of honey make it one of the most ubiquitous ingredients in global cuisine. Additionally, agriculture as we know it today would not exist without bees. We thus literally owe our lives to the apiarists who work tirelessly to raise and protect our buzzing friends. And so, let us raise our glasses in gratitude to our esteemed guest today. The NSDOAF thanks you, and we wish the Walker family and all the employees of Walker Honey Farms a safe, healthy, fun, and prosperous 2023. Cheers.
Cheers. Here.
Hope to see everyone next Zoom, whenever that is, and everyone stay safe. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yes, thank you.
It worked. It worked. So
You did it. Very good.
How lovely. I thank you for that.
toast. We have fun. I will send you his video because he did. So we thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. We love bees. One of my little signs that I do is bee, and we have a Because of You award that we give also, that I give. So we thank you so much. I will work on your ancestry if you would like, and then we will send you your certificates. Thank you so much. Davina, would you like to end it? Davina is my sister.
Well, just shortly tell you about the new club we have, the Spotlight Club. And it's for those members who have worked so hard to honor their extra ancestor farmers. So those who have 15 supplementals can join the Spotlight Club because they absolutely deserve it. And the pin also will come with it that you can purchase. And then those who have 20 supplementals also can purchase another pin. So it's just a fun, neat thing. And we're thinking of extra things to go with this club. So that's the latest on what we're doing.
Mr. Walker, we have members that have supplements up to I believe one of our number one member has 55 ancestors that have been farmers. So we do honor those farmers. We love them.
Yeah.
On behalf of this society, we thank you so much for joining us, for all of our members and our guests. And Mr. Walker, for you taking the time to be with us is very important. Thank you so much.
We appreciate
Thank you for having me.
Thank
you.
you.
Farmer
It's been
Smiles.
lovely to be with you.
Thank you. Farmer Smiles. Bye. See you next month. Okay, Mr. Walker, stay on.
Okay.
And everybody else, they'll start dropping up. I'm going to stop the recording.